watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has once again emphasized on a meeting with Russian counterpart. He said that he will meet Vladimir Putin anywhere except Moscow. Meanwhile, Russia responded by naming Istanbul as preferred venue for potential talks. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas is going to address the UN General Assembly virtually. The move comes amid tensions arise as President Donald Trump's administration barred Abbas from traveling to New York, while Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed to block statehood and far-right ministers pushed for West Bank annexation. Germany has said that it is open to an EU plan to free up to $235 billion in frozen Russian assets to support Ukraine, after reports by Politico has said that the funds would be replaced with EU-backed bonds. The issue marks a shift for Berlin, which had previously raised legal concerns over fully seizing the Russian assets. EU climate chief Wopke Hoekstra has criticized China's new climate targets, calling its plan to cut 7 to 10% of economy-wide emissions by 2035 disappointing and insufficient to meet global goals. The EU further warned that China's immense pollution footprint makes achieving worldwide climate targets far more challenging. Taiwan is searching for 33 missing people after Super Typhoon Ragasa caused a burial lake to overflow, leaving 14 people dead and sweeping away a bridge. Many victims were too elderly to evacuate in time, raising questions over Taiwan's evacuation procedures as the government now studies ways to prevent similar disasters. Sweden and Poland held Operation Gotland Sentry, simulating rapid defense of the strategic island of Gotland, just 300 kilometers from Russia, to secure Baltic Sea supply routes and deter potential attacks, while military chiefs stressed the island's crucial role in NATO defense plans and regional security. Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy was found guilty of criminal conspiracy but cleared of corruption charges in his Libya trial over alleged illegal campaign financing from Muammar Gaddafi. Prosecutors had sought a 7-year sentence, but the Paris court acquitted him on other counts, while Sarkozy insists this case is politically motivated. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that he is ready to step down after the war with Russia ends, declaring his priority is to finish the war. President further emphasized that his focus is ending the conflict, not seeking another term in office. Now, our correspondent Thomas Porteous is currently in New York, and we had a chance to catch up with him shortly after he landed earlier today. Let's listen in to his brief report from the UN headquarters.
Here at the United Nations General Assembly in New York, where leaders from 150 countries gather to push their agendas in front of one another. Now, it has been 80 years since this organization was founded and put forward here in New York. Now, there's a strong sense of urgency here, urgency and reflection, whether how this is going to be renewed, the United Nations, for the next 80 years. Now, many leaders have already been critical of this organization, one being President Donald Trump and one being President Zelensky, saying that this organization cannot and does not go far enough in this day and age. It was, after all, founded by those victorious powers of World War II 80 years ago. Now, what has already happened in this year's session. It was, of course, opened by Brazil, the traditional opener, with a huge speech by Lula da Silva, which pushed the climate agenda and slammed US President Donald Trump and his tariff policies. And also, of course, a huge talking point here, Israel's war in Gaza. Debatably, critically calling it a genocide. Hugely, and then going after the Ukraine war as well. Volodymyr Zelensky also warned the world today in front of the assembly that Ukraine was only the first target for Moscow, and called for stronger security guarantees, particularly from the United States and particularly from the whole United Nations, where he criticized the body as a whole. Another huge and notable guest to the United Nations and speaking in front of the Assembly today was Ahmed al-Shara, a man who would not have been here 1 year ago after Bashar al-Assad's regime fell in December of 2024. He demanded his sanctions were formally lifted by the United Nations. Now, another significant development that has happened here today is that the United Nations has announced plans for an independent scientific panel on artificial intelligence, a major step towards a new and unexpected world that we are going into of artificial intelligence. Now, what is yet to come? 2 days left of this huge meeting of leaders. So we still have the likes of Benjamin Netanyahu to take the stand that of China and Russia, whose foreign ministers and vice president will be speaking in front of the General Assembly and pushing their national agenda forward. High stakes sideline meetings as well on climate, finance, Gaza ceasefire talks, as well as a possible joint initiative on global governance reform. We will, of course, keep you updated here on NewsX World when it comes to it all, here live from the ground in New York.
Thank you very much, Thomas, for sharing that insight all the way from New York. Now we move on. The Kremlin has said that it believes US President Donald Trump remains committed to a peaceful resolution with Ukraine, despite his recent remarks signaling stronger support for Kyiv. Speaking after President Trump and Ukraine could retake all territory occupied by Russia and should act now, while Moscow faces economic strain, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has said that Russia sees no contradiction in the remarks and still assumes Washington has the political will to pursue peace between Ukraine and Russia. Now, further, Trump's comments followed a meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in New York. His Vice President J.D. Vance later said that Trump was growing incredibly impatient with Moscow's unwillingness to negotiate and warned of consequences if Russia fails to act in good faith. Peskov further said that Russia remains open to talks and welcomed continued U.S. engagement in efforts to end this conflict. Separately, Peskov praised Trump's proposal to halt the development of biological weapons, calling it a brilliant initiative. He further said Russia supports the idea and is ready to participate in a global effort to eliminate such weapons, but emphasized that the plan should be formalized through international agreements. Now, for this discussion, we are joined by Ruben Johnson. He's a director at Asia Research Center at the Kazimierz Pulaski Foundation, joins us live from Warsaw. Thank you very much for joining us. Welcome to NewsX World. Now, how does this Kremlin interpret President Trump's recent remarks, even though it seems like they were harsh and they were more towards or protecting Ukraine or on the sides of Ukraine? And what does this suggest about Russia's perspective on U.S. involvement in this conflict?
Thank you for having me. I think a lot of what has changed about the Trump administration's position on the Ukraine war is bound to a couple of factors. One is that Putin has too many times embarrassed President Trump by promising and never delivering. And Trump's not a person that you ever want to embarrass. He's fairly vengeful against people who embarrass him. And secondly, there's been a lot of conversations on the sidelines at the UN General Assembly opening, specifically General Keith Kellogg saying that the position of the administration is going to have to become harsher and more rigid about Russia, because they can see clearly that none of the initiatives they have tried to put towards Moscow to try to come to a negotiated settlement in the Ukraine war, nothing has worked in terms of the Russians refuse to engage. So those two factors, plus the fact that Trump has openly said, I have a whole lot of sanctions I'm ready to inflict on Russia if they don't want to play ball, and they've made it clear they don't want to play ball. So he can't not follow through at this point.
And do you think that Trump's growing impatience with Moscow's reluctance to negotiate reveal something about the shifting dynamics of U.S.-Russia relations?
Well, I wouldn't say shifting so much about the dynamics of the relationship. It comes down more to Trump wanting to have America's reputation as being a peacemaker. And he's always talking about, I've solved 6 wars, I've solved 7 wars. And this is the one which refuses to make any, refuses to be solved, refuses to allow him to make any progress. And so it interferes with this program of trying to get these notional wars around the world shut down, because no one benefits from them except a handful of dictators.
And what are the implications of Russia's openness to peace talks with the U.S. and continued emphasis on negotiations not in Istanbul? What does this location suggest, and are they really willing this time to negotiate?
I doubt that. Me personally, a lot of experience with the Russians. The one thing that's running in parallel in the background with all this is that there is a U.S.-Russia strategic arms agreement that expires in February of next year. And Putin came out in the last few days and said he'd be willing to abide by the restrictions of the treaty, even though the treaty will have been expired. He's willing to abide by the restrictions for another year. So he wants to use that as a bargaining chip in an attempt to delay any substantive negotiations about the war.
Thank you very much, Reuben Johnson, for joining us and sharing your insight all the way from Warsaw. Now we move on to our next news. Israel's Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar has ruled out any plans to annex areas of the West Bank, currently under Palestinian authorities' control. Speaking to Italy's Corriere della Sera, Sa'ar has emphasized that Israel has no intention of discussing annexation of Palestinian-controlled territories, stating that we don't want to control the Palestinians. However, Sa'ar has left open the possibility of extending Israeli law to Israeli communities located in the West Bank that are not under Palestinian authorities' control, with discussions expected after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's return from Washington next week. Now, this position aligns with the complex realities on the ground as outlined in the Oslo Accords, where parts of the West Bank are administered by the Palestinian Authority, others by Israel, but none under full Israeli sovereignty. Now, for this discussion, we are joined by Yossi Cooper-Wasser. He's an Israeli intelligence and security expert, joins us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Yossi, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, can you tell us... Thank you. Now, can you tell us what's the situation in West Bank? Who controls it now, and where and why does Israel not want to rule that area for now?
Well, the situation is like that. 18% of the Judea and Samaria territories are controlled by the Palestinians fully, with one exception, that the control of military action in order to prevent terror is shared between Israel and the Palestinian Authority, and most of it is being done by the Israeli military because the Palestinian Authority is not committed enough to fight against terror. So these are 18% that are considered, seen as areas A, under full Palestinian control. And there are 22% of the areas that are areas B, which are under Palestinian control for civilian purposes and under Israeli control for military purposes. And there is 60%, the rest of the territory, 60% is designated as area C, which is mostly not populated by Palestinians. There are a few Palestinian villages, but most of it is not populated by Palestinians. And this is under Israeli military and civilian control, but Israeli law does not apply there because this is a sensitive matter and everybody waits for the decision, political decision of the fate of the territories in the future sometime when we reach some sort of agreement with the Palestinians about what's going to happen with these territories. And what we're seeing now is that the Palestinians totally forgot about their commitments according to the Oslo agreements that divided the area. And they were not supposed to carry out any political and diplomatic activities, and they do that, and they get unilateral recognition from all kinds of countries around the globe. This creates the new situation where we say to ourselves, should we stick to the agreements as if nothing has happened, or should we apply the law in areas that we consider to be part of Israel and that should be part of Israel in the future?
Yossi, can you tell us more about this area C that you've mentioned? Are they biologically more people who are Arabs or who are Israelis, and are they happy with the Palestinian law that applies to them? Are they willing to accept SAR's proposal to extend Israeli law to this Area C communities?
Well, in the Area C, we have two kinds of populations. There are about 100,000 Palestinians scattered in many, not in many, but in several villages. And there are about 500,000 Israelis living there. And the Israelis are eager to see the application of the Israeli law on them, whereas the Palestinians are not that happy for that, although they are not totally against it, because they believe that this is going to happen. They will enjoy Israeli citizenship as well. But this is not necessarily the case. It's not clear yet if it happens, how it's going to take place in fact, and we are all considering all kinds of options how to deal with that. The Palestinians living there are today citizens of the Palestinian Authority. And the Palestinian Authority does have a role in civilian roles in running their lives. The rules and the laws of the Palestinian Authority apply to these people as well, even though they don't live in areas A and B, but in area C.
Okay.
So they participate, for example, when there were elections, they participated in the elections. There hasn't been any elections for almost 20 years now. So
right.
They don't get to vote so often. But when there were elections, they participated in the elections to the Palestinian parliament. And that's the situation today, of course.
Yossi, with that, I would like to... Yossi, thank you very much for joining us and sharing that insight. That was Yossi Cooper-Wasser from Tel Aviv. Now we move on to Europe. Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy has been found not guilty of receiving illegal campaign financing from late Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi for his successful 2007 presidential bid, but was pronounced guilty of criminal conspiracy in the same case. Sarkozy was acquitted by Paris court of all other charges, including passive corruption. The court was now set to explain its findings and announce sentencing. Sarkozy, who has always denied the charges, was accused of making a deal with Gaddafi in 2005 when he was France's interior minister to obtain campaign financing in exchange for supporting the then isolated Libyan government on the international stage. The 70-year-old has been on trial since January and has said that the case was politically motivated. The court has found him guilty of criminal conspiracy between 2005 and 2007. The court further added that after 2007, he was president and covered by presidential immunity. Meanwhile, the court has found no proof that money from the Libyan regime of Muammar Gaddafi was ultimately used in Sarkozy's winning in 2007 poll campaign. The court has ordered that Sarkozy to be placed in custody later after the conviction. Now for this discussion, we're joined by Alexander Seal. He's a French and British journalist, joins us live from London. Thank you very much for joining us. Welcome to NewsX World. Now,
hello, thank you.
Thank you. Now, what does this Paris's court ruling in the case of Sarkozy's alleged illegal campaign in connection to Libyan former dictator Gaddafi reveal about him? How's French people reacting to this news?
Well, it's a very big shock for French people and for people around the world. So, as you said, the Paris criminal court sentenced the former French president to 5 years in prison. If he appeals, he will still sleep in prison, be in prison. So the judge issued a deferred detention order, meaning he's going to go to prison if he appeals. But the court said that Sarkozy allowed his close associates to seek financial support from the former Libyan president Muammar Gaddafi ahead of the 2007 French presidential election. So it's a big shock for lots of people in the right-wing party in France, the Republicans, and people are just reacting to the news right now because the news just broke.
And Alexander, now what are the potential political and legal implications for Sarkozy's conviction for the criminal conspiracy, particularly given that the court found him covered by presidential immunity after 2007?
Well, it's the most serious corruption trial Sarkozy has faced, and he has already been convicted in 2 separate cases involving influence peddling and campaign overspending. So this ruling deepens the legal troubles of the former French president, who still wields influence on the French right. And Sarkozy, he often meets with politicians in Macron's party and different politicians. So he still has influence, but it's a very big case in France today.
And Alexander, if you can briefly let us know, what are the consequences that Sarkozy will face in terms of his political legacy?
Well, in addition to his prison term, Sarkozy was fined 100,000 euros, but also several former ministers and aides of Nicolas Sarkozy were also convicted of corruption and conspiracy. But the key witness is Ziad Taqiyuddin, who once claimed he delivered cash from Libya to Sarkozy's team, and he died of a heart attack in Beirut a few days ago, just before this trial. So, but Sarkozy has denied all wrongdoing, but he just said in an interview on French TV that he's going to sleep in prison if he appeals.
And is Sarkozy still relevant in today's politics in France? And how is Sarkozy's claims of a politically motivated trial? How might this case affect public trust in the French judicial system?
Well, normally when French presidents or former French presidents go on trial, they don't really go to prison because you have to remember in 2011 when Jacques Chirac went to trial, he received a 2-year suspended prison sentence. And then Sarkozy, who was also always acquitted. So really, Sarkozy is really powerful in French politics. He tried to become president again in 2017, but he didn't win the primaries. But he still has influence among politicians, and really, French people don't trust their politicians anymore because of lies and corruption. So really, there needs to be a huge debate about how how politicians can seek the trust of French people again.
Thank you, Alexander, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we have a breaking news coming in this topic. Now, former French President Nicolas Sarkozy has now reacted to the conviction. He has vowed to appeal to a court ruling that sentenced him to 5 years in prison, including 1 year to be served behind bars, after being found guilty of illegal campaign financing and criminal conspiracy linked to Libyan funds in his 2007 presidential campaign. Speaking after the verdict, Sarkozy has said that "I'm innocent" and claimed the decision undermines confidence in the French justice system. He further described the ruling as extremely serious for the rule of law in France and accused the court of wanting him to sleep in prison as soon as possible. Sarkozy has denied any wrongdoing and will take the case to France's highest appeals court. Now we go back to Alexander Seal for this discussion. Thank you, Alexander, for staying with us. Now, what's your reaction to the news that has just come in and Sarkozy denying any wrongdoing, and he has said that he will take this case further to France's highest appeals court? Will that change anything?
I don't think it'll change anything. And if Sarkozy appeals, then he will definitely has to sleep in prison. He is going to go to prison if he appeals. So he has denied all wrongdoing and announced that he's going to appeal. So really, this case is going to go on if he appeals. But Sarkozy is definitely going to prison.
With that, I would like to thank Alexander Seal for joining us from London. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Asia. Official authorities have stated that more than 1,000 children in Indonesia's West Java have fallen ill this week after consuming school lunches. The incident is the latest in a series of food poisoning outbreaks, casting new questions on President Prabowo Subianto's ambitious free nutritious meals program. Sharing his report on this matter, Governor Didi Mulyadi has said that there have been cases across 4 areas and that NGOs have called for a temporary suspension of the scheme due to health concerns. Students and parents who experienced the incident spoke about their ordeal. Let's listen in.
Pas itu mah enak, tapi pas pulangnya muntah gitu.
Mananya?
Perut, kepala pusing
Pusing
gitu.
ya?
Ya kan nggak bisa dibayangin sih Pak. Ya nggak bisa dibayangin mikirnya kayak gimana gitu. Sampai saya gemeteran gitu, dengarnya gemeteran.
Moreover, community health officials have responded immediately, monitoring children on site and referring severe cases to hospitals while treating mild cases locally to ensure quick care. Let's listen in.
Kemarin kesini mulai kondisinya udah mulai tidak ini tuh pas jam 10 saya udah mulai dapat kabar bahwasanya ada kasus kejadian kembali. Jam 11 udah mulai kacau kondisinya di sini. Terus penanganan dari tenaga medis alhamdulillah sih banyak yang membantu juga. Kalau untuk penanganan terhadap pasiennya kita lihat kondisi umumnya dulu Pak. Gimana kalau misalkan keluhannya dia emang udah kayak kejang-kejang, itu langsung kita rujuk. Kalau misalkan masih bisa ditangani di sini, paling kita tangani di sini, gitu Pak. Kalau setahu saya pas hari Senin juga sama kayak kemarin, cuman yang kemarin lebih membludak banget. Kalau hari Senin itu datanya itu kita hari Senin sampai kemarin pagi sebelum kejadian itu ada di angka 411. Kalau yang hari Senin sampai Rabu pagi. Kalau dari Rabu pas mulai kejadian yang kedua, dari Rabu siang sampai hari ini itu ya 687. Ya kurang lebih 1.000.
Additionally, the head of the National Nutrition Agency Kitchen and the director of Sililin Hospital have also addressed the incident, highlighting the standard operating procedures in place and providing the latest updates on patient care and recovery. Let's listen in.
Sudah sesuai SOP yang juknis terbaru kan sering diperbarui sesuai SOP. Terus yang quality control itu juga dilaksanakan oleh ahli gizi dari si pemorsian seperti itu. Terus dicoba juga sama ahli gizi. Terus tabel uji organoleptisnya dilihatkan ke saya. terus dicek juga gitu sama saya. Sering.
Dari pasien-pasien yang datang yang diduga keracunan MBG itu kebanyakan keluhannya nyeri perut, kemudian ada mual, ada juga yang disertai dengan sesak nafas, sehingga penanganan yang kami lakukan sesuai dengan gejala yang dikeluhkan oleh pasien. Kami lakukan tindakan rehidrasi, pemberian infus dan juga obat-obatan yang diberikan melalui infus supaya efeknya juga lebih cepat.
The outbreak follows last week's incident where 800 students in West Java and Central Sulawesi were poisoned. The Free Nutritious Meals program, aiming to feed 83 million students by year-end, currently serves over 20 million children and has a 171 trillion rupiah budget set to double next year. This is all we have time for. We will continue